So, yeah, I just, okay, so we had like a guided reading, I think,
Yes.
session in the beginning.
Yes.
And then there was the English class.
Yes.
And you chose, because I in the research, I've asked teachers to choose whatever they think is like a good example of what fosters reading for pleasure among their students. So I'd just like you to just talk about what happened in the class, summarize it in your own words, and just what parts of it do you think feed into fostering reading for pleasure?
Okay, so the first part was the guided reading session, and we do that every day.
Okay.
So 2 groups read with an adult, and we do a walkthrough of the book. So we look at the pictures, we make predictions, which the children quite like. We do book detectives, so they become detectives and answer questions, which they're quite eager to do. They like that. The other groups do different games, like on a rotation throughout the week, so it's independent, and they love the one on the laptops because it's quite interactive for them. And obviously a lot of the time they don't really see it that they're reading when they're playing those games. They see it as, oh, we're playing games. So they do really enjoy that. In the second session, we have been doing a build up. So we've been reading the text, The Selfish Crocodile, for 2 weeks now. So we've done lots and lots of work on it, which has led up to them now making their own books to put in the library.
And what parts of this do you feel as a teacher that, these are the things about these lessons that help foster, say, reading for pleasure?
I think that if the children feel that there's a purpose to what they're doing, it makes them more enthusiastic if they can see that there's a reason for doing it. So like when we play the detective game, they like it because they have to solve the clues. They quite like this because obviously they're making books for their own library, and then they're going to get to have their parents come in and share the books. So I think it's sort of, if they can see that there's a reason for doing it.
Okay. And the games on the laptops, what kind of games? I went and I
There's
took
phonics games. So it obviously goes with the phonics screening, and there's a pirate game. So they get words that are real and silly, and they have to decide whether it goes in the treasure chest or whether it goes in the rubbish bin.
Oh, okay. And the silly words, the nonsense words go in the rubbish bin?
Yes, the nonsense words go in the rubbish bin.
And you were asking questions in the text, because I saw that you're using Read Write Ink.
Yes.
And so the questions are the ones that are in, I think they're
at the back of the book.
Inset cover notes. Okay. And let's see. I just like to ask what the term reading for pleasure means to you.
For me, it would be that children are reading for enjoyment, that they select their own books, and that they have a love and a passion of reading. They don't necessarily see it as schoolwork. I want children to do that in their spare time, to enjoy reading and to get something back from it.
And you've asked this, okay? It's like I took a look at the classroom library, and so could you just talk me through how you've set that up?
So the reading garden, we did it together, and we talked about all the different strategies that we can use to help us read words. Then the children obviously made the different things to put up. They decided that they wanted it as a garden because they said that it's relaxing, that they think reading should be relaxing. So we made it into a garden. We got cushions and stuff. They've got like all the high frequency words around that they can just read for sight, and they can select their own books. We've got a variety of fiction and non-fiction books in there, and then if they get stuck, they can look at one of the strategies on the reading garden. They do like that they get free time twice a week where they get to choose what to do. The reading garden has been very popular. They like to go there and, lay down and read their books. We've also noticed that they've started to do like one child will read and the rest sit down and listen. So like their own storytelling.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I wonder if when you're the books there, is it something that you change on a regular basis?
Yeah, so as well, we have what we call an apprenticeship book box. So we change that every term. And what it is we've selected like really well-known books, and everyone reads them to the children. So if it's wet play, the lunchtime staff will read them. I will read them at snack time. And what happens is that the children then become really familiar with these books. We've got enough copies that they can then take them home if they want to. They can use them in the reading garden. And that really promotes a love of reading. We've noticed that they really like repetitive books with a lot of repetition, or books that have got a lot of rhyme. So anything by Julia Donaldson, they really like. So that's been good. Also, they get to take home a book twice a week, a book of their choice, and they're responsible, so today, like after my group had read, I said, go to the reading corner, and if you would like to change your book, you can change your book. So they have the opportunity to change over their books.
And do the books because you're saying that you change, you've got like on the shelves, I saw on the shelf on the site, you had the graded readers. And
yes, yeah.
And ORT.
Yes.
And on the other side, the box has the ones that you're mentioning.
Yes,
it's a mix of picture books. And that's the one that you change.
We've got another box. So I don't know if you saw, there's a plastic box with a seat on top.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that we change every term, and there's books inside there as well.
Okay. And are the children's views, likes and dislikes taken into account?
Yes. Yeah. So at the start of the year, we ask them if they've got any favourite stories from home, and then we read them, and we always take feedback. So sometimes they really like certain books, sometimes they're not so keen on others.
And when you said that you asked them at the start of the year, is it something that's just done in an informal discussion?
Yeah, it's very informal, like a circle time. We just talk about if they've got any favourite stories, what books do they like to read at home, are there any books that we haven't got at school that they would like us to get.
And is it something that as a teacher, I'm sure, we learn things about the children every day, so that goes into, but there isn't a more formal way of getting this sort of data from the children?
No, we don't do it in a formal way.
Okay. That you ask them in the beginning of the year?
At the beginning of the year, yeah.
And what reading program do you use, I think?
We use Ruth Mishkin, and we also use Oxford Reading Tree as well.
So you've got the core phonics is Ruth, is that?
We use letters and sounds for our core phonics, but we take things from the Ruth Mishkin strategy, yeah.
Okay. So you've got letters and sounds and supplementing it with and ORT.
Yes, yeah.
As well. And these are all. Are you using non-decodable readers in your class?
Yes.
So you've got the ORT and Ruth's. All of that stuff is decodable.
Yes.
And then what role do the non-decodable readers play in your class?
So the children, obviously, we do shared reading, which we do quite a lot. Like I did it today on the whiteboard. We did the shared reading. Sometimes it will be the class text, so there will be non-decodable words in those books. Also, the children, that we do lots of sight words, so lots of things on flashcards and things like that, and we teach them to obviously look at the pictures and to lots of different strategies so that they don't just rely on phonics. Yeah.
And so you're supplementing. I can already see that. I've got questions about supplementation, but you're already doing it. And do you feel that the reading program that you've put together aids reading for pleasure, or do you find yourself sometimes bringing things from outside of that to enhance it?
I think that sometimes with the scheme books, they're not, especially the ones that are the lower stages in the scheme books, they're not very exciting, to be honest. Like as they go further up the scheme, they get really, really interesting. But I'd say the ones lower down are not very interesting, and they can be quite boring. So then in that case, we would try and do as much different things as possible. So I would look at the class text that we've been reading with that group, and we'd maybe go through that and do work around that rather than just on the reading scheme, because obviously some of them are literally they are very boring, the lower
Yeah.
ones, and I don't feel that would promote reading for pleasure. So we try to obviously have lots of different opportunities for the children to read, and not just in English lessons. So like even in maths, at the start of maths lessons, we have like, we'll do a word problem and we'll read it together, and you know, we do it in every lesson. We get them to read the date and the learning objective and stuff like that. So it's just trying to obviously think of as many different ways to incorporate it as possible to promote pleasure.
And okay, I feel the same, that the lower, and it is the lower ability children sometimes whose motivation is
less,
risk, and then
they're getting really boring books. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be a problem. And do you find yourself sharing your own reading habits with the children?
Well, I actually really like reading, so I read a lot at home. So I'll talk to them about, like, you know, I'm reading a book, and we'll, you know, they might ask me about it, and I'll tell them, you know, it's by this author or it's about this, and then because they're quite young, they will then, you know, I'll say, oh, like, what about you? What are you reading at home? And they're quite excited to do that. Also, I took them on a trip to the library, just because a lot of our families have recently come to the country, so they're not aware of other services. So I took all the children to the library, and we signed them all up for a library card, and then I sent like a letter home to parents to obviously let them know where the local library is and that they can access that for free. So that was quite a positive thing. A lot of parents came back and said that they actually didn't realise about the library.
Yeah, especially if you're new to the country. That would. Do you have you received any special training that focuses on developing reading for pleasure?
So we do a program here which is called Reading Recovery, and so that's a specialist reading teacher. We often have, every year we'll have like staff insets where that reading teacher will promote strategies that she's using in reading recovery. We've tried different methods. We tried like running reading records and things, a running record where you would like tick and see the appropriate stage for the children. So we do get whole school like staff training on reading a few times a year, but I haven't had anything specifically
reading for pleasure.
No.
Your school is they've signed this Reading for Pleasure pledge.
Yes.
And it's a silver school, and
yeah,
graded as a silver school. So is that something that you find comes up in conversation meetings, something that you're...
Yes, definitely. And we try to do things that will promote it. So we recently did Read Anywhere, which was where we gave the children half an hour and they could literally go anywhere in the building and read a book. So they really enjoyed that. They all wanted to go in the staff room or in the head teacher's office. As I said, you know, we've had we try to invite, in the early years, they invite parents in, you know, to read stories so that it's not always the same person reading to them. We've been putting books outside, so we've got a book corner in our playground outside where the children can go and access books at playtime and lunchtime if they want to, and then we've put like a bench, and you do find that a lot of them do go to it, and you know, some of them are not reading it, they're just making up their own stories to go with the pictures, or they like to pretend to be the teacher and read the book to the class. So that's been something as well, like trying to promote it.
Just making sure it's recording.
In the outside area as well. We don't want it to be something that children just see that we read in the classroom and that's it. We want it to be a whole school sort of approach, and that they see reading as something that they can do everywhere.
Nice. And where was I? Okay, and you said that you this whole, all of the practices that you're mentioning, is it something that how long have you been teaching in this school?
8 years.
Yeah. So is it something that you've noticed kind of change? Have you noticed like a shift in, or a bigger emphasis on reading for pleasure?
I think that there definitely has been, I'd say in the last four years, a real big change on reading for pleasure. A lot of our children, you know, we found that as they went up the school, the enjoyment for reading wasn't as strong as it was in the lower years. So, you know, we've worked with children, we've talked to them, and we now have, they've picked up texts that they enjoy reading. We've now got like a class copy of text so that every child has their own book. They can then take those books home if they want to. They can read them at home, share them with their family, which we feel that has seemed to promote a pleasure more, because the children feel like they've actively chosen the book that they're reading, and also they feel some sort of ownership now because they have their own copy of the text that they're allowed to take home. They seem much more, excited about it. They like getting their own book. That's mine, and we're going to use it for the unit. So that's been really positive. We noticed that loads of our kids liked the Michael Morpurgo books. He was really popular, so we ordered loads and loads of his books for the Key Stage 2 children, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid was very popular. So I know that in Year 4 they started doing that as their class text and working around that, just because it went from the children's interests.
And what do you think? You mentioned that you share your reading habits with the children.
Yeah.
How do you think that helps the children?
I think that then they see it that it's not just something to be done because they're at school. They don't, because obviously I'll say to them, I read before bed. That's what I said to them. I always read before I go to bed. And some of the children were like, do you read when you're not at school? And I was like, of course I read. I really enjoy it. So I think it's important that they don't just see reading as something to be done in the classroom.
Yeah. And when teachers meet for you guys have meetings where you discuss literacy, reading, etc. Do you exchange book recommendation for Year 1 students?
Yes, and also we are part of a cluster, so we meet with other schools every half term. So, for example, a cluster, so it's lots of local schools within the area. So all the Year 1 teachers, there's 5 schools involved. We all come together once every term, and often we will talk about books that we've read with our classes that have worked well, that the children have enjoyed, and we take ideas from each other, which has been really useful as well.
Okay, that's really useful. But it's 5 schools around this area.
They're all in West London, and so we meet and we'll have a topic that we're going to discuss each time we meet. So it could be reading, it might be writing, maths, and then we will sort of share ideas. We'll show each other books that we've, the children's work, what we've produced, and we all get ideas from each other.
And is in these meetings or in the meetings that you have within your school, is it does reading for pleasure, is it something that comes up either as a concern, as something that you're actively planning for, or is it, what do you think takes precedence in these meetings? And
I think a lot of the time it's just sharing experiences of what's worked well for us. Also, it is an opportunity for us to talk about any texts that, the children might have mentioned, that if a child in my class says that they like a book and they've got it at home, I'll often say, why don't you bring it in and we can share it with everybody, which they do. And then if the children have really responded well to that, I would say at these meetings, we read this book, it's really great, could we order some in?
Because some of the questions you answered before, I get to them. What opportunities do children get to read independently during the school day?
So they have independent reading time. If what we've been doing in my class is when they finish their work, if they choose to, they can go to the reading garden as a reward, and then they can choose book and read the book independently in the reading garden. Also, at the end of the day, just before home time, I give my class around 5 to 10 minutes where they get ready for home time, and then they can take out either their scheme book or the book that they've chosen for pleasure, and they can read that at their table. They can either read it to their partner or read it to themselves.
Okay. And you mentioned twice a week you have independent reading. Is that, you mentioned a specific slot for independent reading, or did I?
We do the guided reading every day, so we have half an hour for that every day.
Yeah. And are there any slots throughout the week, or where children just have a time slot where they can choose anything and read? Like, is it?
We have twice a week in Year 1, we have independent free choice time.
Yeah.
So in that time, if they chose to go and read, they could.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you have, and how long is that? You said half an hour?
Half an hour twice a
And
week.
do you find, because this is where my research started for me, because I know we had that in our school and every day for an hour and a half because it was a democratic school.
Okay.
And they could choose whatever. And I noticed that most of the kids would prefer to do other things
Then read.
rather than go to the reading corner. And what trends have you noticed in your...
We've noticed that the girls are quite keen to go and read, and the boys a little bit less so. So to target that, like we've tried putting out magazines and comic books to try and obviously engage the boys. Also, we ordered some superhero books, so Traction Man and stuff like that, which they do. Like, we found that if we've been working on a text in class, the children are more keen to do that. I think it's because they're very familiar with it. So we recently did an African text. The kids loved it, and so during their free time they were making their own books, like and they had the book, they were reading it, they were copying it and stuff like that, which was really nice. So we find that sometimes if we've done a lot of work around a text, they seem a bit keener to access that during their free time.
Yeah, that can be. It's not as maybe sometimes kids are intimidated by books. Could be. And how do you balance reading time that focuses on developing reading skills and reading time that focuses on developing reading for pleasure? Or how much time do you think you're giving to one or the other? Like skill-focused reading time and then reading for pleasure?
I think that obviously during day-to-day teaching, it is more on skill-focused reading. I would say that definitely we do encourage the children to read for pleasure, and that is something I think is equally as important to read for pleasure as it is to read for skill. But I would say that probably I spend more time teaching them to read for skill rather than teaching them to read for pleasure.
Yeah. And is it something that comes from, because you say that you think that both things are equally important, but then but you don't find yourself assigning more time to reading for pleasure. Or you don't feel like there's a balance of those?
I feel that I would give them reading for pleasure time if we had a spare, like if they finish their work, they can go and read for pleasure. But with how big the curriculum is and the expectations of what these children need to achieve by the end of the year, it's just not feasible for me to dedicate. I would love nothing more than to say to them, you can all go and read for pleasure for half an hour, but with the demands of the national curriculum, it's just not possible to do that on a daily basis.
And do you so you've talked about how you organize, how you make room for independent reading.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that. Do you read along with the children during any time? Do you have a time in the day where if they're reading, do you...
So at snack time, we always have a story. So that a different child will choose a story each day. They'll have a story from the book corner, the reading garden, which is their choice. We do shared reading of a class text. So that would be in an English lesson every day. It depends obviously what our topic is, but we did Neil Armstrong not long ago, so we did lots of reading of non-fiction texts together around Neil Armstrong. So I would say that in every lesson I read with them, and then we try, if we read, as I said, every snack time for pleasure, and if there's time at home time, we try and read a story at home time as well.
And these when you read out to children, are you still thinking about, let me transmit some of the skills through this, or is it sometimes just
reading? Yeah.
As a teacher, sometimes it can be, this is an opportunity. Or
At snack time, it's just reading for pleasure while they eat their snack.
And do you ever find yourself having the opportunity to your class is reading and you're also quietly sitting in a corner and reading? Has that ever happened during one of your events or?
During Read Anywhere, which we did where they were allowed to read anywhere, the staff were also reading, but generally no.
How did children react to that event and seeing their teachers reading? And
They absolutely loved it. Yeah, they really did. They were really keen, and they talked about it afterwards. Like, a lot of them went home and told their parents about it. So it was really exciting for them.
Okay. And did you find kids coming up to you and talking about what they were reading during this time? And
I would say afterwards, not during. Not during. It was more like afterwards. They'd say to me, "Oh, I read in reception, and I was reading this book," and yeah.
And is when you let children read during those 5-10 minute slots that you get during the day, do you again have children coming up to you talking to each other about what they're reading?
I think that they talk to each other about what they're reading. Yeah.
I think as a teacher, you're running from one thing to
another, and it's very chaotic. Yes.
All day, and with year ones, I think it gets a bit more challenging also.
Yeah.
And have you noticed ever since because you've been here for 8 years, and you're saying that the Reading for Pleasure focus is about 4 years old.
Yeah.
What kind of difference have you noticed between then and now, especially when it comes to children's reading for pleasure, their interest in books?
I think that children now are much more motivated towards reading. You can definitely tell. Some of the older children at lunchtime, they actually asked for a club where they could go and read at lunchtime in a quiet space. So we actually made like a book club for them, and then they all, we discussed the stories that they've read, and they got to feed back. I do definitely think you do hear children talking more about books that they've read, sharing experiences. We also had a borrowing service, so that like if there were any particular books that children really wanted to read, we ordered them in, and then they could take them home. So that was, we had waiting lists, children waiting for wanting this certain book, and so that was really good. I think before that wouldn't have been the case. I also think that using good quality authors really helps as well. When you've got like an author that's like someone like Roald Dahl, the children are really. So let me just close that door. Yeah, the children are really engaged when it's a text like that. I also think that throughout the school, you can just see it now. Like, I've noticed that in my classroom, they read everything. So if I hand out letters at the end of the day for them to give their parents, you can see the kids sitting at a table reading the letter, trying to read the letter that's for their parents. I just think it's a much more, we read things around the school, so.
Nice. And is there, after these events that you've had, is there any formal time or planned time where children get to say, this is what I read, share it with other children from year one? Or
no, we do. What we do though is we do have pairings with older classes. So like our pair is a year 5 class, and we try and do it about twice a month on a Friday. The year 5s will come down, or we will go up, and they do shared reading. So the year 5s listen to a year 1 read, and then they will read them a story, which is nice.
Yeah. And so this is, my next question was going to be that they get to opportunity to interact with a wider school community, and share what they've read with them. So this is one example. Is there anything else where they interact with other years?
So like we're making our books for our library, these books that they'll be ready next week. So then we will take those books and we will take them to the nursery children, and they're going to get to show their books and read their books to the nursery children. Yeah.
And have you noticed that children talking about text, what kind of role do you think that would play in Reading for Pleasure when they read, and then they go and they tell their parents, and they go and they tell?
For me, that shows that they've really enjoyed the story. And also, one thing that I've noticed with my classes, I know that they've really enjoyed a story. Sometimes I see them playing it on the playground. So the one that we recently did was an African folk tale, and every playtime they were like acting out the story outside and taking on the roles of the characters, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, and with these books, the ones that you do in English class, is there a lot of discussion around the story and
so we do lots of work on, we'll do like some prediction at the start, we'll look at the front cover, talk about what we think it's going to be about, then we'll, we might we read it, we'll do lots of work on they like doing lots of things on